Thank you very much for having me. It's such a pleasure to come to these regional events and see all the innovation, to see all the activity, can I say, in a regional area as opposed to very Sydney-centric, which we tend to be very much. So always enjoyed these opportunities to talk to the regional entrepreneurs, the regional companies, and of course we speak on the food industry. So as Alex said, we are specialists in what we call offering integrated data to our clients. Our client base are suppliers into the food industry like yourself, or many of yourself, but we have a wide range of clients, anything from banks to merchant bankers and universities. We're having representatives here today. And what we focus on and what we do is that we provide market size data, we provide insights, we provide economic forecasting and help in terms of strategic planning for the suppliers who wants to enter the food industry, but equally and even more so the food service market. I'll come to that, but it's a very dynamic industry, and we have been doing this for the last 30 years actually, all up, not only here in Australia, which is our core market, but equally in New Zealand and 23 other markets around the world. So if we start with the big picture and the food industry, the food industry in Australia, across the whole supply chain to the consumer, is actually the largest industry we have in this country. It employs more, and this is where we're getting back to now after COVID. Let's forget COVID. It greatly affected the food service market during those years, but the food industry employs more than 2 million people in Australia, far more than any other industry in this country. And basically, when we talk about the total supply of food and beverages, whether that's imported or whether it comes from producers here, from suppliers and manufacturers here, you have three markets available to you. It's the retail market, it's the food service market, and then it's the convenience market, which is really a rather small market in this country, but it's definitely a retail market, as well as a food service market, straddling both, getting competition from both. So those are the consumer markets available to you. And when we look at that total supply of food and non-alcoholic beverages, approximately 65%, but declining, goes into supermarkets or retail. 8 to 10% goes into the convenience market, but the convenience market is only important if you deal in 5 different product categories. You know, beverages being one, bakery being one, confectionery being one. And as it said on the previous slide, only 20 to 25% of a convenience store or convenience chain store or a petrol station with a convenience store, only 20 to 25% can be attributed to the fast food or the food service offering and sales. In other countries, you go to Europe, just to give you something to compare with, that percentage is 70 to 80%, if not reaching 90%. Also the same in some of the Southeast Asian markets. You know, you go to Thailand, 40-50% of a convenience store in Thailand can be attributed to food and beverage, fast food. And then 25% of that total supply goes into the food service market. That 25% is actually increasing. It's going up, and just in the last decade we have seen that percentage go from 21% to 25%. That's a huge rise. It doesn't sound much, it's 4%, but that's a huge rise when you talk about the billion of tons, the billion of dollars. And as of January 2024, as we entered this year 2024, we're talking a total consumer market turnover of $220 billion, of which retail accounts for around $150 billion and food service $70 billion. This is again to tell you how important the food service market is in relation to the retail market, because I'm sure among people here today, among the large global food suppliers, etc., food service have, up until about 10 years ago, really been the little brother within a company to the, compared to those that deals in the retail market. And so actually, in terms of these two consumer markets available to you, 1/3 is accounted for in terms of your available market by the food service market. And when it comes to Australia, and that's also part of us being unique when it comes to the food industry, and it's being such a very large industry, or the largest industry in this country, we are a very food secure nation. When you look at food security, we do a lot of work or presents papers in terms of global food security, and we are currently rated 22nd out of 113 countries when it comes to the Global Food Security Index. And I could talk to you for a long time about global food security and Australia, but the key point is that we actually produce in this country far more than what we consume. We export around 70% of our total manufacturing and produce. We're only importing 10%, and that 10% is not really because it's not available domestically within Australia. It is because there are trends and fads and so on. There are only one product, and that 10% in import is accounted for by only 6 product categories. And there's only one of them where we can't supply ourselves. Anyone take a guess what that might be? Probably not. Fish and seafood. We only catch domestically, or is being supplied domestically, for 40% of our consumption need. If we didn't import fish and seafood, people in nursing homes, for example, wouldn't eat it. So that's the only product category where we are not self-sufficient. And 80 to 90% of all the fruit and vegetables, meat, milk, and eggs that you find in Australian supermarkets are actually domestically produced, 80 to 90%. And in terms of Australia, we have such a strong agricultural knowledge base and scientific base. We have premium livestock, we have high quality produce. And that's an important point, because this has developed over time, and there's been many people and so many people with science background going into this. And that's one of the reasons why we are one of the most food secure nations in the world. We've always farmed on the edge of what is possible in this country, you know, being such a dry continent. And we have therefore developed knowledge and expertise in how to overcome that. That comes in very importantly now, because why we have dumped down the ranking of being a food secure nation is global warming. It's you know, changing environment, and you know, something like 25% of our largest wheat belt, the output from Western Australian wheat belt has dropped 25% due to global warming just in the last decade. That's a whole other discussion. And as I already said, you have 2 very distinct food markets. And when it comes to us as a nation, and why we eat at home and why we eat when we're out, is because we have such a plethora of different cuisines which we all call our own. We don't really have a national cuisine. Yes, we have a cuisine that's called Australian, but what is Australian? It's a combination of many different cuisines and flavours and dishes. So, and that's actually a unique thing to Australia. If you look at us as a country, wherever you go up to Thailand, and they have the Thai cuisine, that's the national cuisine, and any other cuisine is called foreign, whether that's Asian or Western. You go to France, if you think about it, we are very unique in that, right? That creates a lot of opportunities for suppliers like yourself. The fact that we have such a wide variety of different cuisines, different niches where you can place your products, basically. So I'm sure some of you are thinking about the US because they're a pioneering country too, or have had similar pioneering, people moving to this country. But it's nothing like that. It's nothing like that. They have sort of developed their own fast food. If you look at the food service market, it is nothing like the Australian market. It's all chain-based. So is the UK market, by the way. It's all chain-based, and it's all the same in many ways. We are unique in the way we have adopted, both at home and when we eat out, all these different cuisines. And we don't think about them as foreign. We just say, well, this is more or less a Thai cuisine, etc. And at home, we cook all these various cuisines, but the way we cook at home is actually changing very slowly. Therefore, in the retail market and in the supermarkets, you can see product growth or product decline with maybe 2-3% year on year, but it doesn't change dramatically from year to year because it's a slow evolution. But the way we eat in the food service market, and with this plethora of different cuisines as well as eating out options, different channels and different types of outlets, market size can change very quickly year on year, because the best example that I can take, and this is about you as a supplier, knowing and following the food service market if you want to get into the food service market, because an example that I take, because of market conditions during in the decade prior to COVID breaking in 2020 was the most volatile that we have seen in the Australian food service market because of the different market conditions, and I'm not going to go into that now. But what happened then in 2014, 2015 was that we had the rise and rise of the hamburger. So the hamburger went out of being served in its usual channels when it comes to, and I didn't include that, yep. So here are the different market segments that you have on in the food service market on the commercial channel. So it's your restaurant, hotels, etc., pubs, clubs, function caterers. So basically the hamburger went out of their traditional channels, which were the QSR chains and QSR independents, and then started to be served right across all the different channels, i.e. so incidence of serving a hamburger went up in all of these channels at the same, in other words, how many outlets were serving it, and as well as the penetration, how many hamburgers were sold in an average week. That has an enormous multiplier effect in terms of market size. And why that, and this is the same chart on the institutional side. So even the institutions started to sell hamburgers. Hamburgers are no longer the star now, but it's always going to be in the food service market, to put it that way. So, for example, people providing sauces, different type of sauces and condiments and so on that can go into a hamburger that can be made like a signature dish for that outlet, saw considerable market growth during those days. So, So when we look at food service versus retail, there is no doubt, set COVID aside, set global financial crisis aside in the 2008, 2010, food service is growing globally as well as here in Australia and in in all the other countries that we're looking at, while retail is at best stagnant, if not in decline. And this is why the food service market is becoming more and more an important market to suppliers, basically. And as I mentioned earlier, the Australian convenience market is fairly dismal in this country. And generally speaking, supply margins in the food service market to supply to the food service operators to make all the dishes that they do, all the meals, is higher than what you get in the retail market. Am I going for time? Okay. Yep. So Australia has one of the highest propensities to eat out in the world. And that has really happened over the last 20 years because we eat out for breakfast, brunch, lunch and dinner, and I haven't found a better word for it, but we are the biggest eater-outers of breakfast in the Western world. No one eats out for breakfast as much as we do. And what has happened in terms of the Australian food service market, as you all know, the Australian food service market, or hospitality as it tends to be referred to by government, as well as the arts, were the most hit markets during the COVID years. But to just quickly mention that the food service operators themselves were amazing in terms of how they pivoted and wanted to survive, and permanent closures was never as high as the scaremongering that was happening and was seen in the media. And I'm back to this thing that you have so many different opportunities in the food service market in terms of placing your product and finding different niches, different segments, different parts of the country, and different food service channels as compared to fighting for shelf space in our main supermarkets. This is a very telling, could I say, graph, which we call the food service dollar, which really demonstrates our propensity to eat out. So in January, we spent 31.8% on average of our food and non-alcoholic beverage budget on eating out as opposed to eating at home. And the market has rebounded very well after COVID, and now in 2024 we're really hitting towards and exceeding 2019. So if you look at that 37.2% just before COVID struck, we spent then almost 40% or 40 cents in the dollar on eating out as opposed to eating at home when it comes to food and non-alcoholic beverages. And that 37.2%, in New Zealand, the food service consumer behaves differently. That percentage was about 25%, 25%. In the US, at that time, it was 47%. But importantly, in the US, it's all eating in the lower end of the market. It's all fast food. And in July 2023, we update these numbers every year. And we spend 3-4 months of our research assistants on doing that. So we had just under 80,000 food service outlets in total across the commercial sector and the institutional sector. And I talked earlier about you have 6 main distribution channels, and there won't be any time to talk about that now. But here is a diagram of total food industry distribution, food distribution in Australia. So the retail market is very easy, to put it that way, in terms of how to distribute, how to reach your end consumers. It's more difficult and more fragmented in the food service market, but it also gives you greater opportunities in so many ways. It's just that you need to understand what the distribution looks like. And this is what I mentioned earlier. You have direct distribution, you have what we call general distributors. The largest group, in other words, the most important group in terms of volume, are the independent specialist distributors. Cash and carry is a very small channel in this country. And then you have somewhat supermarkets and other retailers. I think Alex asked me to maybe mention a couple of industry associations in terms of the food service market and also the retail market. There are two main industry associations which actually speaks for advocates, are in Canberra and at state level in terms of the food industry. The Australian Food and Grocery Council, I'm sure you heard about. It's been going for a very long time, and they're actually based in Canberra, and they speak for the retail side, and the retail side only. The Australian Foodservice Advocacy Body speaks for the food service market, and it speaks for the total supply chain of the food service market. We have 5 main stakeholder groups, from producers to the outlets. And when it comes to trade shows, there are really 2 main ones and 1 regional one, if I could say that, or organisers. So you've got Fine Food, which you probably all have heard about, which has now been going for 40 years, which is a very large percentage food service, but it's also retail. It's the whole food industry in that way. It's celebrating 40 years this year. It's the largest food trade show in the Southern Hemisphere, the largest. Then you have Food Service Australia, which is totally focused on the food service market. And then you have FIA Food Service, or FIA Association, which organises regional trade shows. And I think that was it.